Anand Menon is Professor of European Politics and Foreign Affairs, perhaps better known as the Director of the UK in a Changing Europe. For very many people who've been longing for this moment to happen, they've got their answer, January the 31st.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst, the sort of specialists will say, well, look, it's not going to be over on January the 31st, there's lots of negotiating to go. I actually think the government, if it plays its cards right, can at least give the impression to those who voted for it that they've moved us forward a big step. We leave on the 31st of January. I think actually it's important not to underestimate how important that will be psychologically. And then if I were the Prime Minister, I would do two things. I would try and make Brexit as boring as possible for as long as possible, and I would launch some dramatic domestic initiatives so you can turn around to the people and say it's done. It is out of the way. You don't need to bother about it now. Insofar as it's in the news, it's on page 10, not on page 1, and we're going to move forward with this domestic agenda. So I think if they do it well, they can at least initially give the impression that Brexit is behind us.
But whatever the impression is, the reality is now this extraordinary challenge of getting a trade deal in the timetable that the Prime Minister has imposed on himself.
Mm-hmm. That is extraordinary. I mean, what the Prime Minister has said is this transition period due to end in December, he will not extend it, even though we have the right to ask up to the end of June. But even more extraordinary than that, I think, is the fact that we've just had an election that was meant to be the Brexit election, and yet now we do not know what the Prime Minister wants from Brexit. So half of his party is saying this large majority will give Boris Johnson the opportunity to sort of unveil the one-nation Tory he always was, negotiate a softer Brexit. The other half of his party is saying Boris will take us out with a minimal trade deal, with no ties to Europe.
He was quite frank in the political declaration, wasn't he? In the agreements he brought back, he wanted a deep, ambitious, comprehensive trade agreement. I mean, it is there in black and white. It's not legally binding, but his proposition was there.
But it's also there in black and white in the Conservative manifesto that we won't be aligned with EU rules, we won't accept level playing field conditions, we won't be in a customs union. That is a very bare bones FTA.